Wonderful. Emily, thank you for that. And I think that's a really good message to underscore Emily just shared. Please, everybody, put your names in the chat, say where you're from. We're very excited. We know that it's a wow, someone already from New York is here, but we know that it's a national audience. And so really thrilled to have you here to talk about something that's so critically important as financial services digitizes. And that's to ensure that it is an inclusive approach to the next generation of financial services, that we make pathways for everyone. And I'm Sarah Biller. I'm the co-founder of the FinTech Sandbox, and I get a chance to moderate this discussion, but also actually stay out of the way because we have such an amazing, experienced panelist with us today. And those of you on the call who also have a footprint in this space. There are many experienced voices here, and we hope you'll lift up your thoughts and your questions again through the chat. We're going to kick off with just a brief moment of introduction and then turn it over to my dear friend Charvi to kick us through a little bit about what Commonwealth did to really make this notional idea, this abstract idea, of how to build a financial services system that is inclusive and how product design is central to this opportunity, this capability that we seek. But before we get there, I want to welcome Sid. Sid, thank you, co-founder of the Sunny Day Fund. Our first time talking to you, I think through this vehicle of FinTech Sandbox and Commonwealth, sharing the platform. Your platform of emergency and personal savings really takes a novel and unique approach. I know it's one that's personal to you, but it's also one where you've geared towards an employer benefit structure. Really important through this systematic process. And so we're going to come to you shortly and ask you to dive deeper into it, but welcome to the discussion.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much. And we're also joined by Charvi and Gosia from Commonwealth. I think each of you, at least in the Boston community, know them well because they've made such an impression on all of us through the years. Commonwealth is a national not-for-profit. It's not just in Boston, and it's helping advance the building of financial products that lend for security and for opportunity for others to join. They've affected millions of lives. And I think that's important to underscore. When we think about the opportunity set, there are 8 billion of us on the planet. Not all have access to financial services. And the role of Commonwealth in advancing us forward has been unparalleled in our mind. And I know we're honored to have you all here. Charvi, if I may first, I'm going to turn to you to give an example of what it means to build this emergency savings initiative. And then we'll come back, Gosia, with you to kind of round us out in your view, leading this opportunity, and also share a little bit more about your personal background too. But Charvi, if I may, just kick us off with a couple of slides. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so thrilled to be back here with this group. It has been a while since I saw everyone, but the big group was in person then, which is also exciting. And now we're here in this environment. My name is Charvi. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a director here at Commonwealth, and I'm based in Jersey City. Sarah asked us to do very, very quick overviews about ourselves. So before I dive into Commonwealth and BlackRock's Emergency Savings Initiative, a little bit about me. So I've been working in inclusive financial services for over a decade now. Home for me is India, and that's where I started out with inclusive finance. So I was focused on the South Asia Pacific regions, primarily focused on credit building for micro and small businesses. And then back in 2019, I moved to the US and then have been working on financial security issues here, particularly with Commonwealth. And what attracted me to Commonwealth was the focus on savings and wealth building and thinking about systems change, because that's very deeply rooted in how I think about this space and this work. The importance of savings is super foundational. And I'm going to talk more about that. So let me do a very quick overview of Commonwealth. As Sarah mentioned, we're a national nonprofit focused on building financial security and opportunity for all people living in the US. And when I say all people, we also recognize that Black, Latin, women-led households disproportionately experience the impacts of financial insecurity. The strain is larger. So we've taken a very strong equity lens to all of the work that we do. The way we do our work is through innovation and partnerships. So we like to call ourselves a think and do tank. So lots of original research to add to industry understanding about issues of financial insecurity. And then we partner with leading organizations to expand access to high quality savings and wealth building solutions. You'll see some familiar names here on the slide, and then the list of partners we work with is of course larger, but we work with BlackRock, with ADP, JPMC, Wells Fargo, and then more closely in the fintech space with Fintech Sandbox, which has brought us together over here. And now I'm pleased and very, very proud to talk about our work as part of BlackRock's Emergency Savings Initiative, or the ESI. The ESI set out in 2019 as an effort to expand access to high quality and liquid emergency savings solution. This group is probably very, very familiar, but the Fed had come out with data which spoke about how people are living paycheck to paycheck. 40% Americans at that time could not afford a $400 emergency. And that's what we set out to work on as part of this initiative. Now, Commonwealth, as part of the ESI, partnered with leading organizations, so large employers like UPS, AutoNation, Best Buy, large record keepers like Voya, and then ADP, which is the largest payroll provider here, to expand access to high quality solutions for their employees in case of the large employers and for consumers in case of financial institutions. We published a lot of new research on what does it mean to offer a high quality solution. So what are product features that people are looking for? How are record keepers and plan sponsors thinking about offering these solutions? What is the impact of having emergency savings on longer term retirement savings? And in all of the work that we've done, we've intentionally elevated the voices of people whose voices are most often not heard. So grounding the work in the voices of women, of Black employees, of Latin employees. And overall, I'm so proud to share that the work has led to $2 billion in savings for about 10 million households. And we've also influenced important policies such as emergency savings provisions in the recent Secure 2.0 Act as well. We continue to work with partners on furthering the work that we're doing in terms of expanding access, in terms of expanding impact. And a lot of what I shared right now is also summarized in our recently published ESI Impact and Learnings Report, which hopefully one of us will put in chat very soon as well. And I'd encourage all of us to take a look. I'm sure we'll go into details of the project, but that was hopefully a nice overview for everyone.
Sarah, you're muted. And hello, everyone.
Of course, that just shows you how we're all friends, that I start talking and forget to take myself off mute. But Charvi, it really, truly, I'll just underscore just the enthusiasm for the work that you all have done. That CNBC article, that number, $2 billion of individuals really taking control of their financial future. It can't be underestimated, the criticality of this work to the lives of others, but also to the opportunity set for the entrepreneurs that are on this call to actually understand how to drive inclusivity through product design. I say this, and I don't say it crassly, it's also good business, right? It's important that we understand these techniques, but we see it also as a sustainable way to, and all of us in our own businesses, our own fintech strategies, incorporate what we're going to learn today. And Sid, there's no better example of this than the work that you've done with Sunny Day. I think about, this idea, it's a personal story for you. It's one of life experience, which is oftentimes the best entrepreneurial journey. Could we get you just to tag on to Charvi's work introducing Commonwealth? And Charvi, I need you to introduce yourself at some point, but we're going to come back to that. But Sid, take it now down to the practical level, what you've done with Sunny Day. Yeah.
Sure thing. First of all, really grateful to be a part of this panel focused on inclusive product design. I think that somewhere my dissertation committee is proud of me for talking about my own dissertation in a way. So a bit of background myself. Parents and I moved over from Hyderabad, India in the late 90s, and combined, my parents at the time were making about $38,000 per year. And we were doing what we thought was the right thing, and it is the right thing to do, saving as much as possible, and specifically saving into our retirement savings at the time. And we were as savvy as can be in that age. When my parents were laid off, I was the English speaking person in the household, so I was the person that was guiding them through this entire process. And so when they were laid off and we were looking at our money situation, really, it was only the retirement savings. By the time that we took out money from the 401k, after the loss of value and after the penalties, after the taxes, after the transaction fees, turns out there's a lot of afters in these situations. It ended up being about 22 cents on the dollar that they had contributed in the first place. It was our first realization that we have to be very mindful about how we are saving. It was a financial shock that was very traumatic, obviously, and I'm speaking about it 20 years later. But I want to remind you all that this was not just something that happened as a result of the dot-com bubble. There were layoffs earlier this year, later last year, on the heels of a 24% market drop, last year. So while the 401k is great for saving up for retirement, I started realizing that, especially for most working Americans like myself, and I still to this day very much think of myself earning median level wages, this is something that at the end of the day, we need to have those emergency savings on hand. We need to be able to have something not just for when the car breaks down or something happens to the water heater, but if something happens medically, something happens to your source of income, to be able to weather those financial shocks and achieve those immediate financial goals that are set between now and retirement, realize that that's incredibly important. And I think that we can all agree with that. Fundamentally, what we realized and what I realized with Sunny Day Fund, and this is at this point now a decade ago, and started a research project and became a company about 5 years after that, is that the employer is the best place for especially working Americans to save up for emergencies, because that's how the 401k has gotten to be so successful. At the end of the day, the automation that is embedded with money coming directly out of the paycheck and going into a dedicated savings account that you can access anytime that's needed. That's the big difference with emergency savings, right? And ideally, make sure to do so where the employer is able to chip in a couple $100 or whichever amount they would like to be able to do so. That, from our standpoint at Sunny Day Fund, completes what we see as the three critical levers to get people to save: making it simple, making it accessible, making it rewarding. And I think we'll be talking through a bit of that. More professionally, my background includes a bit of M&A strategy, and I also received my PhD in systems engineering, which I alluded to, focused on building inclusive systems driven by behavioral economic principles. So I'm very passionate about this topic.
Yeah. Sid, thank you. We are going to turn back and really dive into those key tenets of what other entrepreneurs can learn from your experience making applications like this simple and accessible, and the thesis behind Sunny Day. I want to give Charvi 1 minute just to introduce herself, and then Gosia, turn to you to really dive in to the lessons. We want this to be a very practical moment for everyone on the call of how we look at just inclusive product design and the framework that you all develop. Charvi, 30 seconds on you first, and then let me turn it back, because I realized we joked that you would introduce yourself, and then just 1 second on you. Yes, everyone knows who they're talking to. Yeah.
Sounds good. So I started out as a management consultant with McKinsey, where I was serving a lot of really large financial institutions. And I think early on, I realized that this was actually at a dinner table, like a meeting after an important client meeting where the partner was celebrating a successful meeting. And they're like, if not McKinsey, where would you be? And I was like, yeah, I would probably be working in impact. So why am I here? And that led me to start thinking about making the change. Because I was working in financial services, I understood that space a little bit, and so decided to transition to working in the intersection of financial services and impact. Like I said, home was India, so wanted to work in the South Asian market. I think I still have a soft spot for that. And the way I think about my US days also, like, what can I take from here to apply to Indian markets as well? And I think that the value of inclusive design, like I think for me, comes down to a personal experience where when I was applying for my postgrad and I had to get student debt, this was still back in India. I had to do all sorts of paperwork, and my parents thankfully could help me with a ton of paperwork, but we managed to get a loan from a public bank in my hometown. And I was, of course, not in my hometown. I was in a different place where I was working. And so I went to the same bank's branch in that city with all of my paperwork for verification, and they couldn't do it. They're like, we can't do it because you have to go to the branch. And I was like, yeah, but you were the same bank, you're the same company, how can you not do this? And so I had to spend on train tickets to go to my hometown to sign and come back, meaning I had to take 2 days off of work, and I had to spend on travel tickets, which just felt very unnecessary, very ridiculous. And that sort of led me to start to think about, what does it mean to make it convenient? I was in a situation where my parents could pay for my train ticket, and so I was able to do that, but not everyone is in that situation. I could lose those 2 days. Not everyone is in that situation. So what does it look like to design in a way that sort of makes sense and makes this accessible for everyone, is sort of where my story began in some ways as well. And very excited to be here and talking about some of this and learning from everyone here. I feel like every time I talk to Sid and Gosia outside of work as well, I'm just like, wow, let's keep talking. So yeah.
Charvi, thank you, because that bookends sits the personalization of this problem, which again, I underscore, knowing a lot of the entrepreneurs who are on the call today, that is what motivates them, right? Is this idea of how do we drive an outcome that has impact, orientation. And Gosia, there's no better person to talk about this framework and help others learn from the experience of Commonwealth than you. Can I turn it to you right now just to introduce yourself with a little more detail, and then also really dive into the Commonwealth's framework that has underpinned a lot of the success that we've seen today?
Yeah, happy to do that, Sarah. Charvi, that's a great story. I don't think I've heard that origin story. So I'm learning. Speaking of learning from each other, continue to do so. And good morning, almost afternoon to everyone. It's lovely to be in community with you, and hopefully we'll have a conversation going pretty quickly. So I am the Senior Director of the Innovation Lab at Commonwealth, where we really focus on research and understanding the needs and wants of folks living on low and moderate incomes, especially, as it sort of impacts financial security and opportunity. I've been doing this work, I don't know, at this point, at least for 15 years, maybe more. I would have to do the math, but for a while, unlike Charvi and Sid, mostly in the nonprofit and the public sector with government. So I sort of have always been in this space, and like Sid, I came here with my parents as a kid, so can definitely relate to to his story, and definitely like this is something that sort of our focus on women and folks of color is definitely something that I sort of relate to very deeply, and I've worked on program level, like directly with helping folks, which is very rewarding. But I think what I really love about, and then sort of larger with the city of Boston, like with impact for the whole city, but I think working at Commonwealth and really thinking about scaling. And I think especially product design is very important way to sort of get to scale by creating products that just make it easier for folks to save, whether it's for emergency savings or for retirement. So I think this is sort of a great place to start as you're thinking about inclusivity. As Charvi mentioned, we like to think of ourselves as a think and do tank. I'm sort of on the innovation lab, sort of more the think, although it's not we all work together, but sort of we do a lot of the research and talking to consumers on the ground to really understand. And for this specific sort of design, this toolkit that I'll be talking about and some of the design principles, we really drew on all of our experience, Commonwealth has been around for 20 plus years, but we really spent 3+ years really researching the non-financial factors for financial inclusion, which include human-centered design. Well, we always like to acknowledge specifically that like people need resources, right? That's like the basic things, but there are also sort of non-financial factors in the design that we can implement to help people once they're on their way, they're more financially secure and they're able to actually use these products in a way that is empowering to them. And so, yeah, I think, in the lab, and, Charvi was actually really involved in this, but we were working on developing this toolkit. Charvi was working, sort of heading up the ESI initiative, and like, we really sort of took what we came up with in the lab and implemented into the work that Charvi and her team were doing. And many of you probably know Brian Gilmer as well, who worked very closely with Charvi. But anyway, so Charvi will talk about those examples. What I'll do now is just quickly walk you through the framework, just to have an idea what we're talking about. And then Charvi and Sid, and we'll sort of jump into conversation and sort of more examples. So just to start, systematic change through product design is really, really important, as I just sort of laid the groundwork. It's really about understanding the needs of end users. So we spent a lot of time talking to folks and really making, not making people work for it, but making the product work for them, so to speak. I think people living on low and moderate incomes often have a lot of financial management skills, so it's not about teaching them, but it's about giving them tools that make it easy for them. And on the next slide, I'll just walk through sort of what it means, for, how to design for system change. And really the first, and I think the most important principle, is really intentionally designing for system change, not just behavioral, like individual behavior change. Well, that's important to incorporate those behavioral economics principles, but I think it's thinking about it in a way where we're not asking the end user to change necessarily, or if we are, we're doing it in a way that the product is making them act in a different way, whether it's nudges or other things, right? But like really thinking about it on a systematic level versus like that individual needs to change. So I think that's our sort of main principle, but the other two, focusing on aspirations and really designing products that meet the needs, wants, and aspirations of people living on low and moderate incomes. Again, I think it's talking to end users, which we endlessly do in the lab, and really understanding what is it that they need, right? And then designing for it versus thinking you're designing for folks, and really engaging folks and thinking about what will work for them and for their specific lifestyle. And then the last one is really around fostering agency, giving people agency and control over their lives within the design. And on the next slide, I'll go very quickly into like, oh yeah, these things are great, but how do you actually make it happen? And these are sort of the sort of more how you do it. And I know that Sariq, our colleague, also shared in the chat the link to the toolkit, so we can sort of look at the details as you're thinking about it. But first is, and again, I think Charvi will have some great examples around this. So framing financial security as a journey, really understanding that there are specific moments in life where folks are sort of prime for engaging with a product. It could be personal, like having a child, 529 might be a great thing to introduce at the time. But they could be positive, like a raise, or something negative, like losing a job, right? Like there are different sort of moments in life where people are more sort of, based on our research, more willing to change, right? Engage, and then giving them easy ways to engage. Another one is connecting to community and resources. And this is really about leveraging community networks to inspire people. Our research shows that seeing others that are financially secure increases others' belief that they can be financially secure as well. So like, oh yeah, I can see these folks that I'm working with. So, building into the platform or the experience. And I think Sid will talk a little bit about that in terms of the Sunny Day Fund, but like, how do you connect people? In our research and investing, we found this, and other research as well, in terms of people being able to connect and talk to each other is very important, both online, but also in real life. So really building places where people can talk on your apps or connect with others who might have a similar experience. Another one is tapping into positive aspiration and values. And really this is around the fact that we found that users are sort of intrinsically motivated to reach financial security and build wealth. And by tapping into like their aspirations and values, and that sort of goes back to really understanding your end user, those sort of aspirations and values are really strong motivations to get people on the path to financial security. One example is in our work around 529 children's savings accounts. Like people are very motivated by saving for their children, for example. So how can you make the product, customizable so you can sort of have that as your goal? And like, this is just one example, but, sort of different fit for different products. And then finally, ensuring dignity and respect in product design, just going in with the understanding that families living on low and moderate incomes really often expect an internalized blame because of the, of their interactions with the financial system in the US. So really thinking how in your product as design, you can, engage the target audience in design. Again, this is something that we go back to all the time, really tapping into and getting input from folks, and then using positive encouragement and trust versus, messages that are shaming, you haven't saved yet, the world is going to end, but sort of more positive, reinforcement throughout the process. So that's a very quick overview, as this is sort of not the main menu of the conversation. It's really sort of around the how we implemented that into our emergency savings initiative with Charvi, and sort of how Sid sort of has been working with some of these and other principles that he's found for a Sunny Day Fund. But yeah, that's a quick overview. Happy to take questions or
Gosia, thank you. We received a note in the chat saying thanks from Jonathan for this overview. I think it leads us into from the primary insights into the more tactical. How is this done? And Charvi and Sid, I know you all are going to come forward and help us dive into particularly how you identified employers to help. I think that's one of the most interesting opportunities here is each of you have struck partnerships with large institutions. Charvi, I might come to you around the discussion of ADP, and then Sid, I'm trying to remember, Sharik, is the next slide for Sid, or is it, forgive me, I missed that this morning. We inserted a slide here as illustration for everyone.
No, you're good. It can be whatever slide you'd like to go to next. So
okay, why don't we do this? Since I messed up, I had my notes, two conflicting points here. Why don't we do this? Charvi, build on Gosia's primary insight discussion on how ADP and other large corporations who represent lots of employees use the framework. And then Sid, may we turn to you for really that hands-on experience you have with Sunny Day Fund. Let's do that. And everyone, we're encouraging you, please feel free to ask questions. We're excited for you to dive in. We don't want to be talking heads. So anytime you want to take a question, I'll filter it in naturally. But Charvi, you go first with the discussion around how you got these large partnerships going.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. So with ADP, ADP is the largest payroll. They do payroll for like 1 in 6 Americans. What we partnered with ADP was on one of their product lines, which is the Wisely digital account. It's a payroll card. So for employees who don't want to receive a paycheck, a direct deposit on their bank account, either because they're unbanked or because they are underbanked and don't necessarily engage that much with the banking system, payroll cards become an alternative. So that's the product with which we were working with ADP. Think of it as a debit card, and it had an associated app along with it. And when we started to work with ADP, they wanted to do savings. They were already thinking about it, and they had a very basic savings pocket that was associated with it. So we collaborated with them on what would it look like to enhance the product experience and make it, again, more inclusive and more engaging for their consumer base. So what we did was, as we always do, we started with research, oversampling for, again, Black, Latinx women users. So we spoke with both users of the Wisely Pay Card and non-users of the Wisely Pay Card. And within the Wisely Pay Card users, we spoke with both people who were already engaging with the savings solution that they had and those who weren't engaging with the savings solution that they had. So we tried to speak with as many people as we could, which involved doing a survey as well as doing some in-depth interviews to really understand, get under some of the things that we got in a survey. We also spoke with some of their employer clients, because the way the product becomes accessible is through the employer that the employee is working with. So it was also important to sort of understand and capture the voices of the employers. We took all of those learnings and we applied some of those to their savings solution. So ADP essentially over the course of the partnership added 4 new product features, which were, again, like I said, grounded in people's voices. And the inclusive design principles that Gosia spoke about. So ADP enabled, one of the features that they added was multiple savings envelopes. So now, to the point Gosia was making, tying to people's aspirations and what they wanted to save towards, people could now choose what they were saving towards and name the envelope the way they wanted to and engage with the envelope the way they chose to engage with the solution. So that's where they tied it to people's aspirations. Another feature that they brought in was automation. So now you could choose to save on payday, which, again, like Gosia said, was a key moment in people's time when people were making savings decisions. And the other option they gave for automation was the day of your choice. So you could choose a day which is not the same as your payday, because, again, we wanted to give people agency and we recognize that different people want to save differently. So payday may not necessarily be the day that everyone is thinking about saving. So what's the day that works for you? And then we also introduced a feature around one of the envelopes that they had was cashback savings. So like if people received cashback on using the payroll card, they could move that or automatically move that cashback towards savings, again, to build savings in an easier way. Now, this led to really solid impact. We had $1.5 billion in increased savings. So $1.3 billion of new savings came over the course of the partnership with ADP. And what was really interesting was that we saw that not only did we see that really large savings amount, which was absolutely incredible to see, we also saw engagement increase with the solution. So there were like a 3.5 times increase in average monthly new savers that came into the platform. So when we think about business case, we're like, is this driving more users? We saw that was happening as well. Another thing that we did was, which I'll talk in more detail for some of our other partners, was we did some focused messaging around this. So 3 employer partners, 3 employer clients of ADP chose to participate in the and run small pilots with them as part of this. And so we said, what would it look like to do some messaging which goes to employees of those clients, telling them, creating awareness, giving them a choice, and like telling them that they have this option. And we saw that led to a 23% increase in savings from the program, which was also pretty fascinating. Another really cool thing, which we go into details on which we mentioned in the case study, what you don't see on the slide here, was that one of those employer clients said that we'll do additional messaging to our employees. So of course, ADP is sending that messaging, but we are going to do that messaging as well. And for that employer client, the 23% number was actually 35%. And for me, at least, that points to, in some ways, the community and resource, the time to community piece, because to Sid's point earlier, workplace matters. And what Gosia was saying, when people see people around them talking about something, there's just like that little bit of additional trust, and that comes into the system. So data also, early evidence, but data also sort of pointed to that, which was very exciting. What we also saw from a savings behavior point of view, which is important, and I'm sure we'll continue to see themes of that come out through the conversation, was we saw build, use, rebuild savings behavior, which is how we think about as high quality emergency savings behavior. These are liquid savings, which people will need to use for different purposes that they have access to. So like your car broke down. Your kid, one example that we've heard is your kid came home and like someone in the class had a birthday party and the gift budget wasn't planned for. So like it could be an emergency, which looks like that. So the nature of the emergency looks different, but people need to withdraw when they want to withdraw. And that's the behavior we saw on the ADP Wisely Pay Card solution, where people built up savings and then they drew down on the savings when they wanted to. And they came back to the product and then built up savings, which was really nice and promising. And then on the next slide, very quickly, what I wanted to talk about was the other case study, which what you see here on the slide are examples of employer-led communication. So Ordination and UPS, both of which are partners of the initiative, they ran messaging for their employees. On the left side, what you see is the Ordination example, which talks about small dollar savings. It starts to frame emergency savings as a journey that people are on, because again, what we see a lot of times is that traditionally, the narrative has focused on you need to have 3 to 6 months to 9 months of savings built up. That may be inaccessible for a lot of people because they're at a very different stage in their financial lives. And so the idea is, how do we make that 3 to 6 to 9 month fund accessible and achievable? And so we always talk about it as a journey, which is wherever you are on the journey, start there, and the product should allow you to do that. So you want to do $10 a paycheck, $20 a paycheck, whatever feels achievable and accessible. The idea is to start. You don't have to wait till you're in a position where you can do $200 or $300 of savings. Start small and build up, because guess what? $20 can lead to $500 in a year. And that type of messaging is messaging that we've seen audiences engage with and appreciate, because it suddenly makes savings, which is hard and out of reach sometimes, doable and achievable, because it's now broken down into small steps.
Charvi, thank you for that, because I think those are tangible applications that people, or features that people can incorporate into their own product suite. I know, Sid, we want to turn to you to kind of think about how you have realized this capability also through Sunny Day Funds technology. If we could, we'll go to yours. I think there's an illustration to help everyone guide through. I want to point out we had 2 questions come into the chat. One, Charvi, around sort of if gig workers were included, and Gosia, you also in the study, and then also the use of a super app. And I think maybe what we ought to do is, first off, understand the question of gig workers. Was it included in your research? And Sid, you probably have a thought here. Then turn to you, Sid, on your application, how it worked with the technology with the Sunny Day Fund. And then turn, I think, Sam, that was your question around the super app. And I think we ought to dive into that, because I know that's also a pressing question. How do we use these applications to help people have a 360 perspective of their lives? So long-winded. Charvi, you want to hit one point, and Gosia, you too, on the inclusion of gig workers or not in your analysis here?
I can quickly talk about this in the context of the ADP work, at least. In my understanding, when we did the research, it was primarily focused on more traditionally employed people, because that's the employer route that we were looking at. But I think the way the research was done, at least the survey, was made open to a lot of people. So there may have been a small fraction of participants, but we didn't necessarily do the analysis to look at the difference. What I do know is, or what I can say is that ADP Wisely since then now has a Wisely Direct option, which essentially anyone can get access to. So what that makes it exciting, right? Because like now, whether or not the platform that you're working with or the employer makes it accessible to you, you can now directly get access to the solution, which is proven to be effective in helping people build savings.
Charvi, thank you. Gosia, anything you want to add there before we turn to Sid?
Sort of from our other work, and I was searching for the report, but we did turn to understanding gig workers a little bit more, not necessarily in the ESI initiative. but I think in terms of human-centered design, right? I think, and I wish we had the time in the beginning so we can get introductions from all 40 of you, but you're all working on sort of, whether it's gig workers or others, but it's really understanding where they're coming from, what are their needs. The landscape, I think, for gig workers is changing. I know in Massachusetts, I just read yesterday, there will be a ballot question in terms of considering them as contract workers, which I think already has happened in other states. But anyway, so it's like understanding their context and actually talking to them, understanding what they need. The study we did was sort of focused on different interventions around financial security. So I'll look for it and I'll share it for you, Osvaldo, and hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but I'll share that. Might be some interesting stuff for you. But yeah, one thing I would just say, like always, and I'm sure a lot of you are already doing it in terms of talking to your end users, but then when you are, I would say, in terms of focusing on people living on low to moderate incomes, I think, their needs will probably be different than those of some of your other end users. But I think by talking to them and designing the application, your apps or whatever products you have in a way that's accessible to them is going to make it more accessible to everyone, right? Like, so I think starting there makes sense, even if that's not like your ultimate target market, but this way you can be inclusive and make the product better for everyone.
Gosia, thank you. I think, Sid, everything that we just heard, you have incorporated in practice. Can we talk a little bit about building Sunny Day Fund with you and what features are in your product? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. And I love the introduction in here as well. So before I have one slide where I'll bring up just a screenshot of our application and talk through some of the more technical elements that we have embedded. But before I get there, I thought I would comment on specifically the three principles in terms of the, what Commonwealth has been talking about thus far and how that relates to emergency savings as well, right? I think when we're thinking about designing for systemic change and designing a business that is incorporating that, we have to make a lot of architectural decisions up front. What is it that we want to do? Should we design a product that works in the flow of what already exists today, or do we want to specify around the user that ultimately needs this the most? Where Sunny Day Fund decided to over-index was, look, if our mission is to really drive emergency savings and financial well-being for all 152 million American workers, it really, yes, we can start where people are already doing it and refine that. And for us, just the team makeup, it just made it was very clear that we really wanted to start with the most challenging part effectively, which are folks that, as Gosia, Charvi, and I shared, that may be immigrants, that may be Black, Latinx, justice involved, Native Americans. There's so many folks that are either intentionally or unintentionally excluded from the world of financial services. So that meant looking at, of course, the employer and what are the different flows that they have in place, but also the world of banking, the world of whether that we're going to choose a product that's under the realm of FDIC or choose a product that's a security at the end of the day, like a money market account or a cash management account. These are two sets of laws, and how a court looks at an individual with respect those laws end up mattering as well. So for us, when we're thinking about systemic change, I think one of the biggest things that for especially the other entrepreneurs on the call, I encourage you to think about is, yes, design for whatever will get you the traction and all that good stuff as soon as possible. But remember that at the end of the day, it will require changes at a policy level. It will require changes with how a market is functioning today, how an employer is thinking about today. There's quite often times that we walked into an employer and we've used, either survey or interview data within their own workforce to come back to that employer and say hey, this is why you need to change the way that you are thinking about this specific solution. Because quite often when we think about a saving solution, it may be something that we have in our pocket today. That's not necessarily something that an immigrant or someone that is never had a bank account in their life before, someone that is just turned 18 and all of a sudden eligible for banking in the first place. Like those are all different experiences for different individuals. So I just wanted to talk about that from a systemic change. Then now I'll start talking about Sunny Day Fund. Sariq, would love for you to bring up the slide. I think that you're already starting to understand a bit of this positive reinforcement piece, at least the aspirational aspect. I mean, just the naming of our own organization, right? We're called Sunny Day Fund, not a rainy day fund. We want you to have and feel joy when you're saving at the end of the day, even when you're withdrawing. It's something that we are encouraging through confetti at times, right? It's actually good things that are happening when you're, as Charvi said, you're building, using, and rebuilding. That cycle is a very positive thing. But we realized that also needed to exist very much at the technical engagement level too. So here's just a screenshot. Here's just a few of the things that we've done when we're thinking about inclusivity. Like first, we're started leveraging Google Translate as well as other web-based translation tools, and trying to do so in a way where, for the 42 million, primary Spanish-speaking individuals and an additional 15 million that is their second language, that's a lot of people in America at the end of the day. Where if we're expecting to build something that's truly inclusive, we need to be able to have that segment of the population as well as others be able to engage with it. So not just being able to have Google Translate be in place, but also make sure that you're cross-checking it for certain things. For example, I know it's World Cup is happening. Like a goal is something that you can kick into a net, right? Or it's something that you achieve. So that being conscious of those types of things is very important. When it's speaking of goals, one of the things that both Gosia and Charvi were talking about is having something that feels like a journey. Yes, emergency savings is important, but one of the things that is also important is being able to achieve things like, buying holiday gifts or perhaps putting down a security deposit to move into a car. I was just meeting with a landscaping company earlier today that was talking about a significant H-2B population that would remit on a very much a scheduled basis. These are all individual use cases, but at the end of the day, they represent financial shocks that are positive to the individual, but that need to be planned and saved towards. Right now, that savings is happening either informally or with very little discipline, right? So by formalizing it, by automating it, we're getting people to be a lot more consistent. And by the way, if something happens along the way, now they have cash that can count on when they need it. Nudge-based communication, whether that is learning, whether that is based on what we are sending out to individuals, on having them celebrate things as they're happening, but also encouraging them to take one step further. That's also incorporated into what we're doing. The last thing I'll comment on is our application is actually not a native application. This is an intentional decision that we made. So we learned along the way that similar to what the team has done, when we interviewed folks, there's a significant population that may be running an older iOS, an older Android operating system on their phone. They may not have enough space on their phone. There's a turnover on their own device. And this is a problem in terms of not just having something that's completely focused on a native app-based experience, which, by the way, you can still more than mimic in a web based methodology, but also in terms of the way that you think about security. You have to be very intentional about making sure the way that how you and I may have access to the technology that like we don't just design security around just those elements. We need to think about it more so from a philosophical perspective as well. So anyways, those are some of the ways that we've been very intentional about how we conducted inclusive product design within Sunny Day Fund.
Yeah. Sid, thank you. It's such a nice transition to Sam's question that came across in the chat. I'm actually going to ask him to join our conversation and ask his question too, because Sid, I want to tease out a word you used. It's a journey for this target audience, these individuals, and that journey to financial stability requires, I think, a perspective that you just brought to us understanding where they are even in their technology capabilities. And so Sid, Gosia, Charvi, I'm going to have Sam ask his question because I know what I think a super app is, but Sam, you probably have something else in mind. Why don't you ask it? And then we've got another question from Jim Smith about optimization for a different age demographic. But Sam, you go first on what you're thinking about on that perspective of a super app. And you're on mute, Sam. I think I see you on mute.
Mhm.
Sorry to, do you mind asking your question?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Hi, everyone. So we started this journey way back in Africa when I used to go visit my brother who had a hospital in Nigeria. And I saw in the markets that people didn't have fractions of the currency. So SMS was very popular. People sold these SMS cards where you could load top up money into a phone. So we created a simple tool on a very basic, $10 phone where you could send money to each other. But basically what you're saying is sending phone credits. And then we had one mama in the market that was the exchange where you would send her money and then she would be able to sort of pay the individuals at the end of the day. So that was 15, 20 years ago. Fast forward, we're in Boston where we built a technology in Europe. Now we're based in Boston, and we launched a super app. And we literally took Sarah's advice in 2016 in a conference where she said, Boston is going to be the fintech capital of the world. And 2, we want to make an impact and we want to help people go forward. So I had a lot of issues with the US where regulation was so complicated, but thanks to Sarah, I saw her effort pushing everybody.
It's not a commercial for us, Sam. Keep going.
So really, I want to thank Sarah particularly on this because it's been a long journey. So we have a super app. We're capable of onboarding people with social security numbers, TIN, ITIN, and then connecting with good people like yourselves, like Sid. I love what you did on your app, and just literally put an icon where someone now can use our wallet and then pay for the services. And we are trying to make it as cost efficient as possible. We're building our own rails to markets like Mexico. We're getting a license in Mexico in less than a month, where we will be able to control the rail and send money all the way to Mexico from the start, from you get paid all the way to finish. My question is, well, you actually answered it in a way while I was waiting when you said you didn't create a native product. So it's very easy for us to integrate you. Just for the heck of it, we added Best Buy just to show that we can add e-commerce. We did that in less than 5 weeks. So we had recently joined with Money.net, where they're helping us through Drive Wealth, which is a fractional stock trading company, to help create certain type of savings for certain type of investment. So I really see a great future of how this can be done in a sort of more comprehensive way with a guidance. And I believe that's where you come in. Can you please sort of give me a very simple highlight of how would this particular individual start and then fund an account and let's say deposit the money with you? I understand that you can use a gift card, but a Visa card costs money. It costs money per transaction and all that stuff. Can we simplify that by being a super app and cutting all that in between?
Yeah, I can answer it from our side, and I'm sure that the team can add on as well. So from our end, the deduction is coming straight out of the paycheck. So the way that they're funding the account is that the deduction is happening at the paycheck level. So, and the choice of that deduction is being made either when they join initially as an employee, or if they're in open enrollment, or whenever the application is being rolled out. So it's a very simple decision, and they can change it anytime that they want, but that's how they decide it. And when they are taking the money out, yes, they have a couple of different options today for sure, including electronic and personal check too. But yes, we are actively considering other options. And I'll be in Boston on next Friday, so happy to meet up and talk.
Perfect. Perfect. So yes, definitely that would be something we would love to add you as a service. Again, we want to do this journey at minimal cost. It's free to have a wallet. Automatically with a wallet, we generate you a bank account at Metropolitan Commercial Bank. And from there, we give you a Visa card. So, and then you can move money across from person to person for free, send money cross border and all that stuff. So we'd love to see how we can integrate you to our services and offer that journey to sort of complete what the journey would be like for an immigrant.
Yeah, and I will just add in terms of super apps and our research, I think the more things you have in one place, especially around finances, sort of the easier it is for folks. And it helps them sort of in their journey. They have, an emergency savings fund. They might also be, saving for that. They might need to transfer money. So I think having, a lot in one place is definitely useful. I think some of the research we have been doing is around liquid savings pockets, which I think, and Charvi can talk more about that, is sort of more common in the retirement space, but we've been working with the Pennsylvania Treasury and their children's savings program about adding a liquid savings to a 529. So again, I think, and that sort of goes to the journey, right? Like, and, goes back to what Sid was saying, like you need, just having retirement is not going to help you when your car is not working. And I think there's sort of low usage specifically for 529s. That's sort of I've mentioned now a couple of times, it's one of my areas of expertise. So I'm using it as an example, but I think, being able to, yes, save for emergencies and save for retirement or saving for your child at the same time is sort of like, creating that journey, right? Like you need to, start somewhere. One very unrelated thing I will say, when Sid was talking, and I've known Sid and Sunny Day Fund for a long time, but I only I think it just got that it's like instead of Rainy Day Fund. And I'm like, oh, this is just even their name is implementing our principles around using positive sort of, as my colleagues know, sometimes it takes me a little bit, but, I usually get there. But, again, I think it's just like another example of our principles and really using the sort of positive frame versus like a rainy day fund, right? Like it could be for fun things like travel, which we all deserve and need. So thank you, Sid.
Yeah. Gosia, thank you for that. And Sid and Sam, I tease you, but just so appreciate your thinking about how to help others. Charvi, I'm thinking you have some thoughts here, and then we're going to go to Jim Smith and ask him to ask his question about working with older consumers. Yeah.
Yeah, no, sounds good. I just wanted to add that, on that point of like having a lot of the financial solutions available in one place and making it easier, I think it comes down to meeting people where they are. Yeah. So if they're already at a place where they're engaging with a solution, it just adding another solution there, the trust is already built in, the usage habit is already built in. And so we see that a while back, a few years back, we had partnered with Walmart on their prepaid card solution where they added a savings pocket with Green Dot Bank. And again, within 2 years, that mobilized like $2 billion in savings. And that number is, of course, a lot higher now because the program's been around for so much longer. Similarly, not exactly a super app yet anyway, but Cash App earlier this year launched as a savings solution. And we've had multiple conversations with them. They've been on panels talking about inclusive design with us and looked at our research. And I think that the last data that they shared at least was within 3 months of the savings solution being active, they had 3 million people who had already opened savings envelopes, which again, just makes sense, right? Because you're using it already for peer-to-peer transactions. In some ways it ties to that, tied to community point as well. And I think what really excites me about these payment solutions, at least when they think about savings, is that because you're already engaged in that payment space, and to make your payments product top of wallet, you're always thinking like, where can I offer discounts? Where can I offer cashbacks? Which already creates an opportunity to build savings. Every time I pay less for something, or if I get money back, that is savings. And if I could move that money into a savings account, quickly integrated the way you were talking about it, Sam, I think that just, it makes me really happy, because I'm like, yes, that's how we're going to make savings accessible everywhere.
Yeah, Charvi, thank you for that. I think this holistic perspective that you all are bringing to our conversation is so critical. I know my eyes are being open to the promise and the challenge that exists. And Emily O'Connor's asked a really important question about challenges getting to participation. Before we go there, Gosia, you mentioned it, and Sid, you kind of touched on it too. Jim Smith, where are you? Can you kind of ask your question about optimization for, thank you, Jim, there you are, for a different demographic, a different age bracket?
Yeah, I'm wondering for people, for people who are in a later stage of life, who may have slightly different needs, maybe less technologically savvy, and may simply not see as well. How are you incorporating those things into your design considerations?
I'm happy to answer it from our side, Jim. So I think the first and foremost thing is, especially for any demographic, I think collecting as much information as possible and making sure that the experience is recorded and co-created like that. Those are elements that we've specifically tried to do. One thing that we learned when talking with an older population is that not only is it important for us to think about it from an app perspective, but really from an overall service and a beneficiary perspective as well. So we really need to put in like security layers effectively, because quite often we would have like folks' daughters call in on behalf of their respective parents or grandparents. And remember, like right now, there are folks that are working in a manufacturing plant or warehousing or healthcare that are like 68 years old or 72 years old. So like these are some of our users. So when they're and they want to save. So like not only having additional functionality such as naming beneficiaries, but also from a service perspective, making sure that this is something that we are able to work with someone else that is in the room as the individual when they're calling in, and making sure that we're picking up the phone when they're calling in. Those are important elements that we had to build in. Technologically speaking, it played a role in terms of the types of goals that we needed to have as well, but also making sure that our app is adjusting to whatever the folks had. So we're not yet ADA compliant, just to be clear, but that's something that we are aspiring to have down the line. I think for us, the two most critical points are when the person is making the decision to start saving in the first place, and the second most important point is when a person is withdrawing. So those are the places where we went in hyper focus to make sure that, like, for different populations, including older populations, that
Oh, Sid, you went on mute accidentally.
Oh, I was done. I just wanted to make sure that others, like Gosia and Charvi, could answer that question as well.
Sorry, I prompted you. Yeah, Gosia, Charvi, what about responding to Jim's question about accessibility for the aging population? Any observations there?
Thanks for the question, Jim. I don't have any specific insight. It's not sort of our area of expertise, but I think whenever we talk about human-centered design, every time I'm humbled, our focus sort of on folks living on low and moderate incomes and like working folks. So like, 18, 20 to, 60, sort of that range. So I think, we don't have specific expertise. Whenever I'm presenting on this, there's always a question about, like you were talking about, like font size and other sort of, human-centered design and in that regard. So again, we don't have expertise in that, but I think I'll just go back to what Sid was saying and what I've probably said like 5 or 6 times. But it's really like talking to the end users, like that's your sort of end user population, and understanding what are their needs, whether it's font size or, again, like, limited access, limited understanding of technology or access or whatnot. So I think, yeah, sorry, I can't give you sort of more specific sort of things other than like really understanding the end user and starting from there.
Charvi, do you want to add anything? I note that Sid, Jim just put a link for you in the chat. If you'll pick it up. But Charvi, what about anything from you on the question? Yeah.
Not really. The one that comes to mind is we were doing this research a couple of years back. So early in the pandemic, we were doing this research with credit unions. It was a small research piece, but we were talking to staff at credit unions who were in the branch, so the bank teller equivalent in the credit union context. And one of the things that came up was just, especially with elderly population, like they spent a lot of time helping people navigate the app when they had an app. Sometimes it looked like their own app, which they had in partnership with someone. Sometimes it even looked like, hey, this is a problem I have with this payments app that I use. Can you help? So that human interaction piece was interesting. What I haven't figured out is what would doing that at scale look like, particularly for fintechs that operate in a digital environment. One fintech that we were, Gosia and I were both on a conversation with, I think, Greenwood, right? Like, and I think one of the things she spoke about was at least how they started their journey. This is a fintech product particularly focused on minority populations. And I was trying to ask her, like, how does she balance this tech touch model? And she said in early days, they just earned more on the side of touch, so like more physical, which meant that the investment was higher upfront. But what that helped them do is what Sid and Gosia were both talking about, like get a lot smarter about consumer experiences because they had so much physical or phone support, and then that allowed them to build their tech a little bit more inclusively. So yeah, I guess if I was to marry those two together, talking to people would be important, particularly with this population. And the more we can do that upfront so that the product is designed in a way, hopefully the tail impact is easier on the business as well.
You all, what a nice springboard, because I think Emily asked the right question to kind of take us home. This idea about designing for inclusivity, the challenges of actually getting partners on board to tackle this problem that might be hidden to them, frankly. And Sid, maybe let's come back to you for what surprised you about sort of the challenges you've encountered, and then we'll go around the horn with Gosia and Charvi too to answer Emily's question.
Yeah, sure thing. So a lot for sure. This is not an easy task, and I think that I'll go back to one of the things that is a principle in itself, which is systemic change, right? What we're doing specifically with something that is offered through the employer as an employee benefit, it's akin to adding a retirement savings or a health savings account, right? So we're doing something that's even more foundational than either of those. I know it sounds crazy to say that, but when you think about it, but like retirement savings is a skyscraper that's built on a solid foundation at the end of the day. And same thing with health savings. It's a very like vertical specific bucket, which is very important. And emergency savings, it hits us and no matter what the use case is, but it just, that's why financial planners and others, they specify that, hey, no matter what, the key to success, the key to wealth building lies with having emergency savings. So I think when we were talking with employers 3, 4, 5 years ago, and even farther back beyond that, during research, like it was they agreed with it from like a personal, yes, like obviously that makes sense, but they never realized the opportunity that they had to make that an impact within their own population. In fact, there continues to be somewhat of a disbelief that I think is only changed really in the last 9 months, 10 months or so, partially probably driven by Secure Act 2.0. So shout out to the Commonwealth team for being a prime advocate of that bill. To acknowledge that, hey, not only is this something that we can do, but this is something that our employees are saying is at the top of their list to do. So I think that dissonance between folks that are in leadership that probably have, maybe it's been a couple of years or a couple of decades since they've experienced the same type of financial precarity as some of the folks that they employ. It's like using data to tell that story of why why emergency savings is so needed today and why this is at the top of their employees list. That has definitely been a challenge that we've tried to rise up to. There's a couple other things as well, really from more so coming back to iterative product design. It's like, well, why is this not an app that you download? Why is this something that is not integrated in this particular experience. So one of the specific features that we over-indexed on again is portability. So when an employee leaves an organization, their money goes with them. They don't need to do any kind of like a form fill out. They don't need to, like when you think about a 401k rollover, it's such a pain right now. And I know it's improving, but it's very much a pain right now. So we don't want the employee to think about that experience when they're thinking about money that they need. By the way, if they're terminated, that may be one of the times that they need this money too. So explaining through that product, that intentional product, the decisions, that's a part of what we do when we are educating employers at the end of the day. So those are some of the challenges that we have come across. I think that I'll end with an opportunity, and this is something that Charvi pointed out as well. I think the most powerful aspect of Secure Act 2.0, which passed in the emergency savings space, is that it's pension linked and it enables automatic enrollment. That automatic enrollment was the key to success for retirement savings, and honestly, to some extent with others as well. And I think that it's going to be the key to success to lifting the floor of financial stability for individuals, because now you're talking about automatic enrollment into something where, and I'm just going to make this up, like you're using that number that Charvi shared earlier, $25 per paycheck. If you're getting paid 26 times per year, yes, you're going to be breaking that $500, $600 threshold very quickly. So that is definitely beating that Federal Reserve statistic out of the park, right? So I think that those are the types of opportunities that lay ahead for the country.
Sid, thank you for that observation. It's that you had the concept, you called it a nudge. And now we've gone from nudge to sort of like just trigger that automatically, right? that enables this security that otherwise we might not see the behavior change that we're talking about. And I so appreciate that insight. Like, how can we do it, and the opportunity that exists. I'm going to take us home with two questions. I'm going to go, Charvi, to you, because Sid talks about it as an entrepreneur, this nimbleness in his mind. I'm struck by it, about seeing how solutions can get put into an application and work. It's a little harder when you're a big Titanic, I know, having worked in large corporations. So let's talk about some of the challenges that might be confronted, as Emily asked too, on the employer side. And then, Gosia, if I could, we end this conversation with you, because you pointed out something amazing in your research that I don't want to leave behind. And then we can, thank everyone too for their contributions. But that's the use of community resources and where they exist, because I sense that we haven't touched on that point yet. We welcome everybody to ask questions, but just want to kind of prepare you for where we're heading with this discussion. I know I'm taking a lot from it. Charvi, you on sort of that, what challenges persist in the employer's mind?
Yeah. So I think the big picture, which I think Sid was also talking about, but like we can't speak about it enough, is that we're talking about shifting the system, and we're talking about shifting the thinking at that macro level, right? Like, I think traditionally, historically, we've all looked at it as a consumer behavior problem. People need to budget better. People need to do these things better. They need to be more responsible with their finances. Don't drink that extra coffee. Like, I think that narrative has lived for far too long. And what we're trying to say is that even if someone were to do all of the right things and make all of the best choices, the system is still not working for that individual. And that's what we want to change. So if we go back to that example, if someone were to put $20 of their paycheck, $25 of the paycheck into a savings, open a savings account with $25, that's not going to work for so many products because there's a minimum balance, right? Otherwise, the account is going to run into some kind of fees. And that makes it hard in that moment, because like, what's the point of putting my $25 if it's going to look like a different number tomorrow? If I were to pull that money out when I need it, there are accounts which would have restrictions on how many times you can pull from that account. So now if I'm in the middle of the month and I want to withdraw from the account, because I'm in this situation, which is anyway upsetting me because it's this financial situation I didn't want to be in, but now here I am. Now, am I also supposed to do the math of, hey, have I withdrawn 4 times this month or 5 times this month? Like, is this going to cost me a fee? So I think just from a product point of view, like highlighting that these are the things you're making people think about. And so here is how the product needs to shift. So like, I think just at that level, helping people understand, working with organizations to go from that journey of, it's not just a behavior problem, it's also a product issue, and the products need to look better. So I think that's one big thing that we're often up against, but we also see that silver line, or at least that silver line is what I live for, where a large organization launches that product and then they see that impact and they're like, oh, I guess people can save after all, because Walmart launched that product, $2 billion in savings. ADP launched that problem, $1.5 billion in savings. So clearly when you design these high quality products, it happens. And then I think the other is also, with larger organizations, we're also working with legacy systems, right? So a little bit is also just helping organizations think about it. Being patient when working with companies that, of course, they're like sort of straddling all of these systems which don't necessarily talk to each other. I was always surprised while working at McKinsey, and I thought that's because I'm getting started, but I feel like a few years out, I won't say how many, a few years out, I feel like the problem is the same. Like, the 2 departments within these companies don't know what the other department is doing. And so oftentimes what we are doing is just saying, hey, talk to that department. We'll facilitate a conversation. Let's all look at the problem together. Let's all look at this holistically. I think within the workplace context, a very typical example, which might resonate with folks, is also HR systems and payroll systems. Now, when you want to launch an emergency saving solution, which is high quality, and you want to make it easy for people to save, you want it to work with the payroll system so that all of the nice automation things that we're talking about work seamlessly. Which means that the payroll system needs to be brought in, which is a different system than the HR system. So now we're already talking about 2 teams which report differently, are measured against different metrics, coming together and trying to figure out this problem. So I think that's something we work towards, and that's where we see partners appreciate that value, because oftentimes we're just helping them look at it in a macro way and come together and talk about these things together. And then the last example I'm going to give is, which again, I think the larger the organization, these problems come up, is communication. So we saw in that, like the ADP example that I gave, communication leads to more awareness, which leads to more take up, right? That's a no-brainer in some ways. And a lot of times employers are just worried about bombarding people with information and doing too much communication. And we did our research where we found that employees actually want more information. We like that data shows that they want more communication. It shows that they want communications through different channels, because again, often we are saying email, we'll send an email a month or 2 emails a month if you're lucky. And then we're like, great, do your frontline workers look at email? We're like, no, we actually don't even have email IDs for most of our workers. I was like, cool, so you're sending an email to corporate staff, then let's talk. So I think things like that are things which I think sits at where like people don't realize that they're like, it's just business as usual very often. And we, I think, just ask questions which then lead to organic solutions a lot of times.
Yeah, Charvi, thank you for that. Again, just this whole thread that's being pulled through kind of the last, if it's a stool of 3 legs, gosh, that idea of where the community resources reside. And then Sid, it occurs to me, because you've never been on this panel before, and Gosia and Charvi are, we actually have one final question we're going to ask. So I'm going to give you the heads up, because I did it to Abby Johnson one year and she about died. So I'm going to tell you in advance so you're ready. We're going to close with, what impact do you hope to have from your product in 3 years? So just kind of think about that. I realize I'm looking at my own notes being like, I didn't prep Sid for the final question. So you think about it. Gosh, I'm going to turn to you on community resource ideas. And then we're going to do that around the horn. Gosh, I'd like to stick with you on what you hope the impact of your work to be. Charvi, then you, then Sid, and then we're done. And everyone goes away really inspired to do more good. But Gosia, what about resources in the community that can also contribute to inclusive design?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that sort of, again, that I've thought about personally and professionally for a long time in terms of, I think when we think of resources, I think access to communities and to other folks who might be part of our community, but are sort of further along the financial journey is really important. And I think when you're creating products, there is a way to do it both through like on the platform, through shared interest discussion groups, or really sometimes live, right? Actually connecting people. And I think Charvi talked a little bit about an example from Greenwood, right? Like when they put in a lot more, especially for these communities, I think to build trust and to really engage folks, I think sometimes, it might make sense as they were doing in the beginning, right? In the sort of engagement phase, and then understanding how to build the technology. I know that, that Sid and Sunny Day Fund also have like a sort of personal in life touch, and maybe he can talk about it a little bit when it goes to him. But I do think, I think I always think of these examples. If when you have a lot of money, you end up not paying for a lot of things because you have a friend with a house on Martha's Vineyard, and you might go there free for vacation. You'll get all kinds of things for free, right? So I think the building resources and building community sort of be within the sort of specific group that you're working with, but also beyond, I think is really important. There's a group in Boston that's very focused on that, Boston Union Capital. It's a nonprofit, but yeah, just to emphasize, it's a very important thing. It could be done on the app and off the app, and really something that sort of encourages continued engagement with the product once you do that. But yeah, over to Sid in case you want to share a little bit about your sort of community engagement strategies and answer the big question from Sarah.
Would you like me to go now, Sarah, or after?
Yeah, Sid, why don't you do this? We're going to give you time to think. So address Gosh's question on community. Gosh, I'm going to come back to you on where you see in 3 years that vision for impact. Because Sid, you're going to close us out.
Okay, all right.
And then, yeah. And Charvi, I'm going to go to you next. So sorry to be so pedantic, but Sid, go ahead. What do you think about that question of engaging community into this design?
Yeah, it's community is so very important. I think when I think about community, first of all, I think of us being in the same community as Commonwealth, and as I discovered earlier today, as the same community as you, Sarah. I think that with regards to Sunny Day Fund, and specifically what we're doing with workplace emergency savings, it's been really interesting to build trust, because when we are focusing on members of the community that, again, have, whether intentionally or unintentionally, have been excluded from the world of financial services, trust is the very first barrier that we have to overcome. So already by leveraging their employer, we know that we are getting some plus points for trust. But something that we realized is, for example, with a quick service restaurant organization, we are creating a champion-based approach in terms of rolling out Sunny Day Fund with all of those locations. So imagine every single location where you go and get your vegan fried chicken in this particular case. Don't ask me how that's done. It just tastes good. I've had it. But each one of these spots that ends up having about 40 to 45 employees on a weekly basis, there is one person that they can rely on that knows Sunny Day Fund best, and is someone that will walk any individual through Sunny Day Fund, but also in turn is paying it forward. And by the way, they're also being rewarded for giving forward, right? So I think that having that type of mindset where every single, where it's decentralized at the end of the day, and it's not just coming from HR, we're building communities of practice that are equipped with resources that are both knowledge as well as like financial, I think is incredibly important. I think the second thing is, what gets me really excited is that this policy aspect that's happening as well, because now it's starting to feel like it's not just something that's happening within an employer. It's starting to feel like a movement, and it's starting to feel like a movement that is built around financial inclusion and equity more broadly. And I think that that's a good thing. And because if we're able to accomplish that, we're able to also influence everything else in a very positive way. So this is where we are seeing employers that on our platform, employees on our platform, prospective folks that are just become really passionate about just the simple concept that, hey, I need to be able to rely on my own money when I need it. I don't want to be in debt to anyone else. I want to build my own financial life with dignity. I think that they might not be there right now, but they want to do that. And I think that it goes to that second one, right? Like focusing on that aspirational way of thinking. I think that that's what is really creating a sense of community among folks, that's not just Sunny Day Fund, but others that are in the marketplace that are doing what we're doing. We're exchanging ideas like crazy at this point.
Yeah. Sid, thank you, because I think I'm so struck, and I know a lot, again, I go back to knowing a lot of the people on the call. The power of this convening group, and gosh, I'm going to go to you because Commonwealth has really led from the front here with Charvi, is the superpower is we understand how the markets work, how to move money into ways that's impactful. There are ways to lift up individuals in ways that are so promising and so substantive and so meaningful for today's world. And so I just have cold chills listening to you all talk. I'm going to do that little round the horn. I'm going to remind everybody that they have exceptional opportunity and capability to do good. And so, Gosia, what do you hope in 3 years from your deep work at Commonwealth? What do you want to see from it? Then Charvi, you, and then Sid, you'll close us.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks everyone for being here. I think for me, it's already seeing the work that we've done in the lab, through the work of Charvi and really working with these large corporations and impacting them, as well, fintechs like Sunny Day Fund and others, right? Like on my end, we mostly work with sort of with government, with smaller fintechs. And speaking of which, if anyone is interested, please reach out to me. At some point, Sarah shared my LinkedIn, and you can sort of connect. But I can also put my email in here. But yeah, I think it's sort of continuing to work, for scale through, the work of the accelerator and Charvi, and sort of the work that Commonwealth does with sort of these larger players. But then also continuing to learn and innovate with folks like you who are on the ground and sort of creating products. So yeah, I hope to continue to do that in 3 years and see even larger impact.
Yeah, Gosia, thank you. I will underscore that you are sincere when you say, I am here to help. In fact, your email just came into the chat. And I think that's another moment in time where financial services has ceased to be sort of this exclusive enclave, but others willing to lift up and help inform your work. And Charvi, I know you're doing that in spades too. What do you want your impact to be, or what do you hope from things that you're doing at Commonwealth?
Yeah, I think, so if I look just at the workplace, within the workplace context, emergency savings starts to be as much of a norm as 401ks. Like, I feel like the more we talk to people, every time we're talking to workers, like there's just a basic level of 401k understanding that exists. And I would like to believe that with all of these large organizations and small organizations who are doing emergency savings, we get to that point with emergency savings as well. And I think just overall start to think about benefits more inclusively for LMI workers. Like benefits design is typically skewed towards higher income. So seeing that shift would be really, really nice. And I'll be very happy if we are there.
Yeah.
When we are there.
Yeah. When we are there. Very worthy. Sid, what do you say?
So I'll say from Sunny Day Fund's perspective, we aspire to have 3 million savers that are counting on their own money when something happens, good or bad. And I think that for us is a bit of a nirvana. And within what that also means for us as a team, we are a certified MBE, and I think that I also want the team to really see the success of their fruits. at the end of the day, our team is built of the individuals that have gone through their own set of financial trauma. And I think I can't understate how passionately they feel about this topic. So I, of course, want them to be as successful as well.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I am just honored and blessed. I feel very inspired to go do something. I don't know what, but I'm going to go do something. But I'm going to right now. I'm going to turn it over to Emily. Emily, are you there still? She may. Yeah. Emily,
Yes.
Any parting words you want to share before we hang up?
Just thank you all so much for joining, and we'll be sending out some follow-up materials after today's call with more resources from the team at Commonwealth. And again, thank you so much for all of your great questions, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.